At the risk of sounding corny, gang, I feel like that was really a hairy experience that I just sat through. And I was reminded almost instantly why it had been 37 years since the last time I watched this movie. By the end of this video, you'll know those details as well, all the gory details. But until then, let's go ahead and hit rewind and get into 1981's The Howling. My loyalties to either vampires or werewolves changed about as often as the weather did. And it was really all about whatever movie was getting ready to hit the theaters. I'd lean into that culture. This movie, though, it came out when I was just a year old. And at a year old, I was watching scary movies at a young age, not quite 1 year old. So I didn't see this one until I had already declared myself a lost boy because of those Santa Clara exploits with Kiefer and the Coreys. That was what I was locked into. So vampires were it for me in the 80s. But I went to a sleepover at a buddy's house, and my buddy's younger brother wanted to pop in The Howling. We watched it, and oh baby. Now this came out before Cujo, but Cujo is what I knew Dee Wallace from, and we might as well go ahead and get this out of the way right now. Dee Wallace is far and away one of the most gorgeous actresses of all time. Really not even all that close. And then on top of all that, you see her in these roles and you really believe her as this maternal sort of protector. And then you see her in other scenes in these movies and you're like, hey Dee. It was like if you took all the 80s effects and crammed them into one. That's the title card that you get here. You get the sound of ripping, chimes in the background, glass shattering. It all worked, though. I thought the title card was really good. You hear talks of like shape shifting and changing and somebody calling it the gift. And you're immediately intrigued as to what these voices are, who these people are, what's going on. And then you hear these news reports of a recent serial killer in the area. There's a lot going on right away in a very short amount of time that we're into this movie. And Dee Wallace plays Karen White, who is a mildly famous news anchor that this serial killer in question has been contacting. Now, she's supported by her husband, Bill, who is the asshole that she was banging on the side in Cujo, and her friends Terry and Chris are also involved in this sting that the police set up so that Karen can lure Eddie out of hiding and they can capture him. Eddie, of course, being the serial killer. Now, this operation leads her into probably one of the more scuzzy parts of town that you'll ever see committed to film on the silver screen. And ultimately, she is led into a adult bookstore or a porno store or whatever kind of store you want to call it. It's not the most appropriate place to be, especially for a young, beautiful woman. They stick out like a sore thumb. And the normal clientele that's in there sees her, either gets very intrigued or very embarrassed and walks away. The guy behind the counter takes notice. And then Dee Wallace's character, Karen, she slides into this numbered booth that the serial killer Eddie has told her to meet him in. He appears behind her, plays a very graphic movie on the TV in there before he seemingly changes into something and tells her to stand up, turn around, and look at him. Now, he says to her that he's going to light her whole body up, which my wife laughs wildly when I tell her shit like that, but you have to shoot your shot. You got to give it a go. Cops intervene in the nick of time, shoot Eddie dead, presumably, and rescue Karen. Now, she goes through some things, though, here. She goes through some very serious trauma based upon what happened. She remembers pieces of it, but she doesn't remember the whole thing. A lot of restless nights, tense marital issues. Obviously, she is not in the mood for any sort of close physical contact with her husband, which drives him a little bonkers. But there's flashbacks of Eddie in that film that he made her watch. George, who is a friend of the group, is also a doctor or shrink of some sort, hears all of Karen's complaints and suggests that her and Bill head to some sort of wilderness retreat. And as soon as we get there, as soon as our lead couple gets out there, you immediately get bad vibes, baby. Even at the tender young age I saw this film at for the first time, I just knew everybody out there had to be wolves, or at least the vast majority of them were wolves and the rest of them were cattle. Sad old man, though. You get to meet this old man and you see him falling apart, or you just see him over it. Because obviously werewolves, they don't die of natural causes. They live quite long, and he looks like he is just ready to be done with the whole thing. He says his teeth are shot. He looks longingly at a kissing couple, and you can just tell he's a lonely guy. Which brings us, of course, to Marcia. Marsha. Now, she is this witchy chick out there in the wilderness, and as she meets Bill, she gives off strong vibes that she wants to bang Bill. And as an audience, you know that this is going to happen eventually. Now, Bill is attacked in the woods, gets bitten, and then later on, he winds up finding Marsha's shack out in the middle of the sticks. One thing leads to another. Bill gets frisky, turns into a werewolf, and we immediately know that Karen is in a bad spot out there with all these people, especially now that she's all on her own. Terry and Chris, on the other hand, the friends who also work at the news station that look out closely for Karen after her ordeal at the porno store, they're looking into Eddie, the serial killer, and they discover not only does he himself have ties to this retreat that Karen and Bill were sent off to, but his body is missing from the morgue. What could that mean in a horror film, I wonder? So this whole time, Karen's been hearing howling out there at these cabins, and she's scared on top of being scarred still from that porno booth attack. But when she confronts Bill, once she knows that he's been sleeping with Marsha, he backhands her, brutally backhands her. Now, this is an unfortunate part of the 80s that was thought to be somewhat acceptable. I mean, you saw this in film back then constantly, and it wasn't then and it isn't now. I'm not a fan of that sort of stuff. I realize this is a movie and this isn't real. It was uncomfortable for me to watch as somebody who kind of watched a little bit of that growing up. Wasn't a fan of it then, and I didn't like it now. But this is all leading to a reveal that they are all wolves, including this doctor who has been trying like hell to sort of civilize these people, whereas everyone else wants to just run free. In fact, the old man we talked about earlier drops a great line on the doc when he says, "You can't tame what's meant to be wild, Doc. It's not natural." I thought that was a killer line, delivered very well, and I thought this guy, this old guy, would have a bit of a meatier part, no pun intended, in the movie, but we saw him here and there, and when we did get him, it was memorable, like he had meaningful things to do on screen. I gotta tell you though, gangbuster ending on this movie, because Karen is trapped in a car with wolves outside clawing to get in, and it reminded me very much of the predicament she found herself in when she was starring in Cujo. This, of course, is before her and Chris narrowly get away and go to this great, spectacular length to prove to the world that these things exist on broadcast television. Now, The Howling does a lot of really strong things in this movie, and at the top of the list, and not named Dee Wallace, the practical effects I thought were really, really good. I mean, the werewolves looked great, the transformation into the beasts. It wasn't An American Werewolf in London. It wasn't that good, but it was still pretty amazing for what they were able to do in 1981. It just looked believable. It looked awesome. Pacing was really good in the movie. It didn't really drag anywhere. I thought that they had a solid story, and I enjoyed the notion of this doctor trying to domesticate people of his kind with the revolt following shortly thereafter. Ending too. The ending was a chef's kiss because I love how they wrapped everything up, that final scene. And Joe Dante would go on to give us the amazing Gremlins. So we could see right then and there that this guy was on the uptick. Dee Wallace is a Hall of Famer to me. I mean, forget the fact that she's easy on the eyes. Every role she's in, she absolutely owns, and she makes the character that much more believable. I love the fact that Rob Zombie cast her in as many movies as he did, even though some of them were just absolute dumpster fires. But I grew up loving her everywhere I saw her, and she carries this movie from start to finish. Murray Futterman is here as a bookshop owner and guy who supplies the silver bullets to take these werewolves out eventually. He's a fucking icon, and he will be celebrated everywhere I see him. Every single time I see him in any film, we're going to stop, we're going to dedicate a paragraph to that man and his Kentucky Harvester, and we're going to have a great time doing it.
15 years old, hasn't given me a day's trouble in 15 years. You know why? Kentucky Harvester. It ain't some farm piece of crap you pick up these days. That's a Kentucky Harvester.
There isn't much about this movie that I hate. I mean, the cast is not super strong outside of Dee Wallace. Even if there are several known names here, we just didn't get enough from them. There just wasn't enough for them to do, and it didn't make it meaningful. It didn't have anybody that really stood out aside from the lead. And, you know, the real reason, though, if we're getting into things and we're talking about negatives, the real reason I never came back to this movie after all these decades was there is You know, there's obviously the scene where Dee Wallace's character Karen gets backhanded by her husband, but there is like a griminess to the beginning of this movie that probably didn't sit well with me when I was a young kid watching it. You know, every town has that part of town that you don't want to find yourselves in after dark, and Dee Wallace going through this scummy part of town and getting propositioned by people and then ultimately going into this adult bookstore, that's just part of the movie, right? But I didn't like her watching or having to watch this film where this woman was apparently being taken against her will. I'm sure it was just, there's plenty of stuff out there, I'm sure, that is just fabricated. It's just part of the show. But for me as a young kid, it was super uncomfortable to me, and I just never went back to it. And as I watched this movie just recently for the rewatch, I'm still not a big fan of that sort of thing. Obviously, there's a lot of movies that are a lot worse out there. Trust me, I've seen some of them. For me, it's a pass, though. I wasn't a fan. This movie is going to age gracefully. I don't know if I'll come back to it for the reason I just laid out, but as a standalone horror movie, as something you could put on and watch, it's a 7 out of 10. I mean, it's a really solid horror outing. Now, the sequels, the follow-ups that we would get, different story entirely, but we're not talking about those right now. We're talking about The Howling. So if you enjoy talking about The Howling, or horror movies in general, or 80s movies in general, you happen to find the right spot. So think about subscribing to the channel, like this video, comment if you feel like this is a fair grade for this movie. If a 7 out of 10 makes sense, let me know. If you think it's higher or lower, I'd love to hear that too. This is Aging Gracefully. I'm Matthew Essex. I will see you guys on the other side.